Implausible Nature now has dice. That's right, you can get these awesome D6s made by our partner, Baron of Dice. These custom dice have the Implausible Nature logo on the 6 side and also come with square corners, which means they will roll more evenly than rounded corner dice. Head on over to baronofdice.com and use discount code IN40K to get a discount on your order and support us at the same time. Check out his full collection of dice for all your gaming needs with the link down in the description. Welcome to Implausible Nature, your home for all things Black Templar. On today's video, we are talking about one of the most classic, iconic units in all of Black Templars. That's right, the Crusader Squad. So they were great, especially at the end of 9th edition, when they got free war gear and reduced cost, when all of the points drops and everything like that. They became a really great unit, and they did not disappoint in 10th. So today we're going to be doing a unit analysis of them. We're going to be talking about the Primaris version, and we're going to go over the datasheet here quickly, talk about what they've got to offer, and then we're going to talk about how we would run them, what synergies they have with us as an army, and how you can best use them on the tabletop. So let's get started with them. Their stat line really hasn't changed. Still 2 wounds. There is that new OC stat, objective control. It is 2 for them because they were troops previously. Now they are battle line, so you can take up to 6 of them, which means yes, you can have 120 Crusaders on the field if you wanted to. I think we could fit that in a 2,000 point list, right, Bob?
Yep, we're making it.
So yeah, stay tuned for if that list is viable or not. I don't know if it is, but it sounds fun, right? So they have some changes from their 9th edition version of themselves. Their gear is all still the same because that's what comes in the box. The Sword Brother can take a Power Pistol or a Heavy Bolt Pistol, and either a Power Axe or a Power Sword. Now, of course, in 10th edition, the distinction between those 2 weapons is gone. It is now just a power weapon, which is great because I like to, use some of the other cool weapons, and now it's the same stat profile, which is good. The Power Fists got straight up better. They now hit on 3s. They did lose that pip of AP, but don't forget too, a lot of things went down in AP. It's not just Power Fists, so I don't really consider that a nerf because everything went down in the AP department, almost universally across the board for a lot of units, not just Space Marine things. But hitting on 3s is really a pretty huge buff for them. And on top of that, we have ways to buff their AP with one of our strats, so we can get it back to that AP3. So really just a straight up buff for the Power Fist, which is awesome. Some of the biggest changes is obviously as an army, we've lost the reroll, advance, and charge. Well, these guys keep it as one of their special abilities. The same name, Righteous Seal. You can reroll, advance, and charge rolls with this, which will synergize really well with a couple of units that you can pair with them, which we'll talk about here in a moment. One of the biggest surprises for them was they got scouts 6 inches. So before the battle starts, you can move these guys up to 6 inches, which you can use to get in a better position or into cover that maybe you couldn't before, depending on the layout of your train. This is really powerful, and it makes spamming a bunch of 10-man squads something that might actually be viable. So, of course, the other big change for data sheets in general is that there's no more individual model costs. It's either minimum squad size is this, and maximum squad size is something else. So these guys clock in at 160 points for 10, 16 points per model average. That's only 2 points more than the version of themselves in 9th edition. So still really cheap for what they bring to the table. And, unfortunately, though, you're either going to be going with a 10-man or a 20-man because nobody wants to pay 320 points for 15 guys. So that is a bit of a downside, but I think 20-man squads are going to be actually a thing that is viable in 10th edition. So the other last really big important change here, a lot with shock assault as a rule for Space Marines being gone, most Space Marine units got just +1 attack built into their profile. Well, Primaris Crusader squads got 2 built in. That's right. They have 5 chainsword attacks. And chainswords did keep their 1 pip of AP, which is really important. That means that a basic 10-man squad of these guys with 2 power fists and the sword brother are pumping out 35 chainsword attacks on the charge, or just in general every turn, which is insane. And that pairs really well with abilities that happen on a 6 to hit, which we have several of and access to several of, and we'll talk about that shortly. So overall, any character that can attach to an intercessor squad for these guys can also attach to them, which is great. So overall, really, really happy with this data sheet. They are fantastic in my opinion. Bob, what are your thoughts?
All right. So in a vacuum, they are very, very good. So Scout 6 is a great way to get them up the board really fast, in addition to their reroll advancement charges that you spoke about. Um, we know that at the time of this recording, Games Workshop had just come out and said that they're going to make some adjustments to towering, uh, indirect, some devastating wounds, fate dice, some of those things. So the viability of the Crusader squad foot base is going to be much improved if what we think is going to happen is going to happen. So right now, lists tend to focus a little bit more on mechanization because of those factors that are out there right now. However, if those are gone and they balance it out a little bit, the Primaris Crusader squads are going to be very, very useful in your lists, especially if you take them in numbers. So Alex touched on having a 20-man squad. I probably would take one of those in your unit, but I like the 10-man squads a lot. So now the 20-man squad accepts character buffs the best, obviously, because it's a
Yep.
force multiplier on larger squads. And we'll get to them in just a second. But I feel like there is still characters that you can put on the 10-man to make it viable. If you're running the 20-man squad, we're not going to really do the math in this, so it's going to be one of those that just trust us. It can, if you put a character such as Grimaldus on it, and we'll get deeper into that, and Castellan, you can kill literally anything in the game on average.
Yeah.
So the damage potential is astronomically high with the Primaris Crusader squad
I
if
did
it's
some
intact.
napkin math the other day on a 20-man with Grimaldus and utilizing our Crusader's Wrath strat, the one that gives us an extra AP,
Yep.
and then being in our Suffer Not vow, or using a strat for that too, depending on what you want to go with. The Just the chain swords alone did something like 18 wounds to a knight. So it's like I said, I haven't officially like sat down and done all of it. I just did some quick calculations, and I feel like with the right seasoning of buffs, a character, depending on who that character is, and a CP or two, like Bob said, this a 20-man squad, if it hits intact, is brutal in the amount of damage output that I can do.
Yeah. And the 10-man squads are nothing to sniff at either. They will
Yeah.
also do quite a bit of damage. They will trade up.
Hmm.
Now, we're in that little points section of, 160 points where a lot of things are either decently cheaper or they're going to be decently more expensive. So, an example would be Terminator Squad. There, obviously that's 200 points there. So, are the Primaris Crusader Squad's going to be able to take the 5-man Terminator Squad out at 10-man? probably not. So that might be a little bit of out of reach. But a lot of those things in the different armies they're hovering around 100 points.
Hmm.
So you just have to be careful with them. But 160 points, you can definitely bring a ton of these guys in your list. Make it really hard for your opponent to choose what you're going to do, especially with the scouts. I feel there's something to be said for leaving characters off of your Crusader squad so you get that scout, get onto objectives, or start cooking into your secondaries right away off the bat, so that
Yeah.
you're gonna put yourself on the right foot.
I think if you're running 3 to 4 10-man squads, you probably want to go most of them with no characters, because then
Yep.
you can really abuse that scout ability, and suddenly, you're in the middle of the board. If you get first turn, you're suddenly in the middle of the board on turn one, going essentially 12 inches. So, yeah, I think something like that would be a great usage of not putting a character in them.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it's actually, if you even consider it, that's even more than that, because you get the free 6 inches, then you move, then you can also advance as well.
Yeah, that's
So
true. Re-rolling it, which means you're probably going to average around 4.5
yeah, four
inches
and a half.
on that. So I mean, that's pretty a good chunk of movement. And even if you don't go first, and some of them get shot or one of them gets shot, you can use devout push and get another d6 inches. So they can be pretty speedy, with that scout ability, which is pretty nice.
As far as ornaments go, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but chain swords I think is the way to go, except for the 2 power fists per
Yep.
10 that you always want to have, and then you're going to take that power weapon on those.
Yeah, you
Now
you
you
have
get the
to.
free pistols, so I
Yep.
would give the pyre pistol to your guys. I mean, there's nothing that hurts it. It's not strength 3 anymore; it's strength
Yep.
4.
Yep.
So
It
even
lost its
more.
pip of AP, but it's D6 hits,
Yeah.
versus, one shot with AP1. The extra hits definitely make up, and the fact that it's auto hitting makes up for that, in my opinion. So I'd always take the Pyro Pistol. Plus, it's cool, right?
Yeah.
But like you said, I think there's no question that we pretty much are going to be wanting to run exclusively chainswords and power fists on these guys. It's just 5 attacks is too good to pass up.
Yep. Yep. We're not gaining anything with the bolt rifle.
Yeah,
So, I mean, you get AP, but we have ways of getting AP
we have
with,
other units that are more designed around shooting. Units like Stern Guard and Intercessors. If you really want a bunch of bolt rifle shots, I would go with one of those units instead, because they have other different tools that allow them to be better at that. Stern Guard have devastating wounds, and can once a game they can shoot shoot a second time after they've killed something. And Intercessors have sticky objectives and grenade launchers. So I think if you want a bunch of bolt rifles, one of those two units is going to be your better bet.
yep. Now, so we talked a little bit about some combos.
Yeah,
So
so
it's
we talked about no characters. What characters would we put on a 10-man squad, Bob?
one thing to note is if a character from your army with the leader ability has the ability to attach to an intercessor squad, it can be also attached to this squad. So that's a nice caveat to really have. But what I'll start with, there's a few characters that I would recommend, but the main one from our data sheets would be the Castellan. So he's going to be the actual Castellan. So I know there's a Castellan Sword Brethren
So confusing.
in the Sword Brethren, but yeah, it's a little bit confusing. I know it's a different unit, the Sword Brethren, but there's actual a Castellan model. So he's the chonky boy. So he gives lethal hits. So that's going to be really kind of important to activate, especially if we are in accept any challenge, which gives us sustain hits. We will also get lethal hits. Now they don't stack on each other, They did clarify that, so
Yeah.
you you're going to get your one sustained hit, and then, or I'm sorry, your one lethal hit, and then if you generate an additional attack,
An
that's just a
additional hit.
regular
Yeah.
attack.
Yep.
So, but still, even with that, you're going to be generating a lot of lethal hits, which is going to be upping your damage potential significantly with all of those chainsword attacks. That's going to be a massive, massive improvement. The Stellan is cheap enough at 70 points there. So he is one of those characters that I would say is actually beneficial to putting on a 10-man squad. So, with the way that the characters work now, you have to attach them to a character. Obviously, we kind of know that now. So if you want to up the damage of your 10-man to be able to trade into something higher value like Terminators, you really need to invest in like a Castellan or that type of thing. Um, and the Castellan has that 5-point discount over the Primaris Lieutenant, which
Yeah.
has basically the exact same rules except for the armament. Um, but yes, so he is a great take, and yeah, he's a good one. There's other ones that you want to consider though as well. Some of them are going to be a little bit outside the the idea of that you might think of. So Judicar, if you are not taking any of the Primaris Sword Brethren or Blade Guard Veteran, it could be a potential good take for the many talked about times of fights first. He's also just a character that can do some blending, which is nice, especially with the large squad, give you some precision in that squad. We also have the Marshal. If you, for some reason, want to get some of that zero CP for your stratagems, which is a possibility, but I think you're probably going to want to add that to uh, a, a unit
Sword
that,
Brethren.
yeah, Sword Brethren, something that's going to be a little bit more dangerous on these guys. But
Yeah.
we have the Primaris Chaplain, who is fairly cheap as well, who is going to help you significantly as well. So he's pretty cheap. You're getting the add one to your wound roll, and then he will
Which will
also,
help those chain swords.
yeah, helps the chain swords a lot. But what really is going to be important, especially for the larger squads, is having the ability to fix your battle shock. So
Yeah.
one of the biggest weaknesses of the 20-man squad is it's much easier to battle shock. If we are in the correct uh, vow, then it's harder. However, not being battle shocked and not being able to have the ability to capture objectives, especially being our battle line, that's going to be a big problem for a 20-man squad, and this will help you get around that. So those are some characters that are really kind of cool to go with the Primaris Crusader squad, especially if they're smaller.
Yeah. I would even venture to say that the Emperor's Champion would not be a bad take on a 10-man squad. He gives a bunch of extra combat ability. They provide a bodyguard for him and a vehicle that he can get in pretty quickly. I think none of those options are bad takes. Obviously, we think the Castellan is going to be your best option just because it provides that free lethal hits. So that way, if you're not in uh, Suffer Not, then you can still get access to it without having to spend a strat on it. But yeah, so some different interesting options that are available to us. Um, uh, I wouldn't go crazy if you're going to be running a bunch of 10-man squads. I wouldn't go crazy with characters on them.
Yeah,
I'd pick
absolutely.
I'd pick maybe one, maybe two, depending on how many squads you're running, and put a character on them. I would not go crazy with them. Now, the nice thing about the generic characters is that they can also get an enhancement. So things like Tannhauser's Bones and Sigismund's Seal are pretty good. However, generally speaking, those two upgrades you probably want either on a 20-man squad or something like a Primaris Sword Brethren squad, where they really benefit from those added abilities in that particular vow. So, so yeah. So now the 20-man squad. Obviously, is a different animal. It has a huge number of bodies. It's going to be a lot more durable because of that,
Yep.
and it's going to accept buffs much better. And this is where our special characters come into play.
Yes.
So High Marshal Helbrecht and Grimaldus are both fantastic with a 20-man Crusader squad. Bob, which one do you like the best?
I like Romaldus better, personally, just because it gives you tactical flexibility with
Hmm.
what you do.
Yes.
He's no slouch himself either. He does have a decent melee profile. But what you really take him for is the relics of the Emperor
Hmm.
Ascendant. So the first one, obviously, is the banner of the Fallen Crusaders. You can declare a charge in the turn that you advanced or fell back, which is advance and charge. Everyone's was clamoring for that, right?
Yep. Yep. And
So
here it is.
not only can you get your on average, so if you're moving uh, the 6 inches, then you're going to get 4.5 ish on your
On
advance and
average.
charge.
Yep.
Then you get your charge as well.
Yep.
Now,
And you
thing
get to
to
re-roll that
note
as well.
is if you add a character to the Primaris Crusader squad, you lose Scout.
Yeah.
That was clarified.
I do
So,
think Grimaldus is worth losing Scout over on a 20-man
yes,
squad.
it is.
You know, he's just so tactically flexible with a squad like that to be able to do what you need to. Um, you mentioned the banner. The other two are also excellent. Remnant of the Fallen Temple gives the models in this unit have a 5+ feel no pain.
Yep.
And then I alluded to this earlier. The Scepter of Anointing improved the AP of your melee weapons by 1. So now their chainswords are AP2, and then you can stack Crusader's Wrath and have AP3 chainswords, which is
Yep.
silly.
Yep.
So, and just in case that wasn't enough, he gives the whole unit re-rolls to hit. So it's pretty awesome.
Yes. He
He provides a lot of not only synergy, but also a lot of tactical flexibility that you can use.
And what's great about Gamaldus is he will allow you to not have to worry about where your ult the moment is going, because he's going to give you all of those rerolls. Plus, you can do your armor penetration. He does a ton of things for you with that 20 man, who are by themselves gonna do a lot of damage. But this takes him to the next level, as well
Yeah,
as giving him that durability that you don't necessarily have to worry about when you're if you're not taking a hold. So he's a linchpin there. However,
yeah,
you also have High Marshal Halbert, who is no slouch either. He's not, I would say, probably not as good as he was in ninth edition, but
no,
he's significantly cheaper as a result, 105 points. His weaponry is awesome. So he has 12
yeah.
attack. He hits on twos, strength 6, AP3, 1 damage. So he's one of those characters that has, I believe it did take a 1 pip reduction. However, it's still AP3, which is huge.
I think it was AP3 before,
So it
which is
could have been,
awesome.
but it's
Yeah,
still like my main point is like his melee profile is still awesome.
yeah,
So he's going to do some damage there. But what he's going to do is he's going to add 1 to the strength characteristics of your the melee in the unit that he has, but it also gives you critical hit on a 5+. So if you're running a vow with sustained hits or lethal hits, or even
yeah.
have it with those
You
special
use a
rules,
strat.
yep, with the strats, or hopefully they change Castellan so he can join that unit
Yeah, that would be
potentially.
really nice.
So you're going to be getting those on a 5+ instead of the 6+, which is going to even more dramatically improve the damage output of this unit. And then he also has High Marshal, which gives him some mortal wounds. So, I mean,
It's the he did lose the servitor people that were had their own set of attacks, but I choose to believe that his high martial ability is the servitors causing those mortal wounds.
those rags, man.
Yeah.
Those rags are
And the cool thing
dangerous.
about the high martial ability is it's at the start of the fight phase. It's not when he charges. You'd think like abilities like this would be when he charges. This is just every fight phase he causes, more than likely going to be at least D3 mortal wounds. He's really basically got a 50% chance to cause 3 or more mortal wounds, which is nuts. So, so yeah, so you really can't go wrong with that. He did lose 3 wounds going into this edition, which is unfortunate. But at the same time, he also can now be bodyguarded by a 20-man Crusader squad,
Yeah.
so or a 11-man Primaris Sword Brethren. So, and yes, precision exists, but he does still have a 2-up 4+ invulnerable, which is nice. So I'm not super worried about him. Um, so um, so yeah, overall, the real big reason you want to take him is to get that 5+ critical hit, because now you're looking at a huge block of attacks that can be lethal and or sustained hits, triggering on fives, and if that target is oathed, then you are going to have a metric ton of damage coming out of that unit. So um, unfortunately, he doesn't bring the tactical flexibility that Grimaldus does to the squad, but that's okay because what he lacks in there, he makes up for in sheer raw damage output. Which also means that, like, as that squad takes casualties, they're still going to be more effective than they would be otherwise. So,
Yeah.
um, I do want to go back to Grimaldus for one moment, and I want to point something out. Is that Grimaldus has the 3 servitors. Uh, Only one of them needs to be alive. When he joins the squad, they are not characters, so they just become other models in the squad, which means you can treat the 2 of them as ablative wounds if you want to. And because they share a data sheet with Grimaldus, and the data sheet doesn't say otherwise, they get his invulnerable save and his feel no pain ability. So that means that regardless of what ability he's chosen for the squad, they have a 3-up save, a 4-up invulnerable, and a 5-up feel no pain. So you've got 2 ablative wounds that you can really kind of just chuck a high damage shot at or something, that might kill a neophyte, or excuse me, an initiate, one of your 2 wound guys or something, and potentially tank some stuff on that 4+ invulnerable, which is pretty humorous. I don't know if that's GW's intent or not, but that's the way the datasheet is worded right now.
Yep.
Um, that may change in the future. We'll find out, but nifty little combo that you can do for that. Um, something else that's great with both of our named characters is both of them are leadership 5+, which means that's really going to help you when you have a 20-man block that's going to be taking more battle shock tests. That 5+ means you don't have to be in uphold to really make sure that that unit passes more than they fail.
Yep. Yep. So now that we've talked about some different combos with them and what they do for you, how do you put them in a list? So we're still early on in 10th edition, and we're going to see some tweaking as mentioned earlier in the video. But there's a couple ways that you could go with this, in my opinion. So you could take several Primaris Crusader squads. Uh, you could probably fit even up to 5, maybe 6 of them in a list. We're going to try it. We're going to try it. But, 3, 4, definitely reasonable. You're going to have
Yeah,
your battle line covered. You're obviously going to put your support pieces in there. I would take them at the 10-man size with these guys and just
yeah,
advance them across the board. They are going to probably be your main melee uh, piece in your board in your list, just
yeah,
because even the trained swords do a significant amount of damage to a lot of different things. Obviously, you're probably going to play with something a little bit harder hitting, maybe the Primaris Sword Brethren, for some heavier hitting damage, but they're going to be the bulk of the damage that you're going to see
yeah,
in that type of list.
yep,
There's also going to be a list where you could take maybe one, possibly 2 larger Primaris Crusader squads. I would say the more viable one would be to take the one, so that can be more of the middle of the board. You give buffs with your named characters, and then support it with some other units. You don't necessarily have to have other Primaris Crusader squads, but you could maybe one or two other squads in there with your support pieces like your lancers and things of that
Hmm.
nature
Yeah.
to be able to do that. And I think that would work well with your list. Now, what I would not do with this list, and I've seen a lot of people doing, and I think it's a list mistake when you're building your list, is when you take a large Primaris Crusader squad and take a lot of other elite things in your list. So lethality is down, right? But right now, the ability to kill infantry is, at least in my experience and what I've seen from games, I've had 5 games under my
Still pretty
belt so
high.
far. It's still pretty high. So you still need numbers of units to be able to survive
Yeah.
the game. So if you're taking a large group Primaris Crusader squad and a 10-man Terminator squad and a couple of 10-man Desolator squads and maybe a Land Raider Crusader with some Sword Brethren, and that's all the points you got, you
Yeah.
are going to get demolished.
And
So,
something else that I've noticed too is the looking at the secondaries, especially the fixed secondaries. You need units. A lot of them revolve around you choose a unit that's eligible to shoot. So there's no more actions in 40k, but you choose a unit that's eligible to shoot. That unit then cannot shoot or charge that turn, uh, and then you just score points, right, based off of that.
mhm,
So if you have limited numbers of units, you can't have like your big block of Crusaders doing that thing and then just sitting there doing nothing because they did a thing to score points, right? You got to have enough units. You really need to have enough units that you can do these other things, um, and not worry about whether that unit shoots or not, because their combat potential is rather insignificant. They're there for utility and to score you points. So you still got to have those types of units. Things like we've talked about in the past, things like infiltrators, things like incursors, reavers are now good. To do stuff like that with.
yep,
Um, those types of units you're still going to need to have, because if everything that you have is focused on I need to kill with this and kill with that, then you're not going to have any units to score points with. You really got to be cognizant of that and not get too excited about like let's go elite, everything elite. Like that's we're not going to win games that way.
yep. So I definitely would stay away from that. If you can have your big block of Primaris Crusader squads,
Yep.
I think that's totally viable. You just have to piece around it. You're going
Yeah.
to have some MSU to be able to do and
Yeah.
score some
Do some
things.
things. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're not going to have, you don't necessarily have to go all MSU, multiple small units for those that aren't unfamiliar with the term. And you can have some big block stuff, but you just have to be cognizant that it's a 320 point unit
That's a
that
lot. And you're
you're
probably adding a character to it.
with a
So
character. So that's a
yeah.
fourth of your list.
Yeah.
And if you're adding like Land Raider Crusaders and Primaris Sword Brethren, which everyone wants to do that, right? Because
Right.
the
Because
Land
they're
Raiders
great.
are it's cool. You're going to come up against a list that maybe it's knights or something, and they just demolish your squad in one
Yeah.
turn
Yep.
because you've blast is good and the differing things towering and
Yep.
such, and you have 5 more units on the board. So just
Yeah.
be very careful with that. You have to have other threats on the board, multiple threats projecting across different pieces of the board so that your opponent has to make those tough decisions. But overall, the Primaris Crusader squad is very excellent at what it does. The 10-man squad is excellent at what it does, and it trades up, especially if you give them a cheap character to go with it. And they are great on objectives. So they honestly, you can charge off of the an objective towards a character that's getting close, and go back if necessary, depending on if you have, a need to fall back because we don't have to worry about falling back anymore. There's just a ton of things that you can do with the Primaris Crusader squad because of
Yep.
Scout, the access to the Righteous Zeal, and obviously Oath of Moments.
They have, yep, like you said, they have a ton of tools. There's multiple ways to utilize them, and they're versatile. And they hit hard in melee,
Yep.
which is kind of what we want. They are a multi toolbox of things that you can use in your game, and that they fulfill multiple roles, which is good because that means you can adapt on the fly as you need to for them to do things. So yeah, so there you have it. That's our take on Primaris Crusader squads. They are a fantastic unit that you should definitely consider in every single one of your lists. And Yeah, let us know what you think down in the comments. Do you agree with us? Was there anything that we didn't mention that you've been using them for, or combos that we left out? Definitely, let us know down in the comments. Also, check us out on Patreon. We've got a really awesome set of Patreon benefits, including exclusive access to Discord channels and we've got Patreon exclusive dice coming, so check that out as well. Speaking of Discord, we have a really active Discord community. We'd love for you to join and talk shop with us and all the great folks that we have in there. So check that out. Links for both of those are in the description. And Until next time, keep on crusading.